Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi, back here in Walterboro, my second home. I get the same room every week. It's becoming too much like home. So, day 16 of the Alec Murdaugh double murder trial, no lack of drama. And we're starting to get used to that. Last week, it was a bomb threat. This week, COVID. We're going to get to that in just a minute. All right. I have to give a big thank you to Kat, Big Toes, Susan, Eleanor, Terry, Sandra, Jackie, Rebecca, and Carrie for your donations. Thank you very much. Appreciate your generosity. Music fact of the day. All right. ABBA. I love ABBA. Just Waterloo, Dancing Queen, just some really good songs. But you know, their outfits they're kind of famous for, right? But that was actually a way to save money on their tax bill. So ABBA exploited a Swedish law which meant clothes were tax deductible if their owners could prove they were not used for daily wear. Cannot see them going grocery shopping in the get-ups they were in the 70s. All right. So, man, what a day. What a day. So the day started out with a little bit of unsettling news, which is we got some jurors that have COVID 2 released because they were COVID positive. And so now we have two of the alternates in. One man looks to be in his 30s. The other is another man, looks to be about in his 40s. But here's the deal. That literally leaves 3 alternate jurors to finish out this trial. And that's if nobody else gets COVID. So both sides were okay. I mean, to me, it sounded like both sides would have been okay if Judge Nguyen would have said, hey, all right, we're going to take some time here. Make sure this doesn't spread like wildfire. We're all breathing this COVID air. I'm masking up. I ain't risking it. My Grammy's 88. We just got over COVID. That landed her in the hospital. So I'm not even playing, but there's no mask mandate by Judge Nguyen, and he's not going to limit spectators. So, I mean, Harpootlian is concerned about a jury train wreck. And so this morning, the jurors were tested. They will be tested again on Wednesday. And Creighton Waters mentioned a delay, and Harpootlian, ultimately said he worries about a mistrial if we lose many more jurors to COVID. And it's true. But ultimately, no social distancing. I think the court staff ultimately will decide the mask mandate if there is one. They were optional today. Not a whole lot of us sitting in the seats wore one. So I'll tell you, the stuff is really contagious. I know many people that have it right now. Me and Grammy got it 5 minutes in a place getting her blood drawn for her regular doctor. And that was the only place we had been all week. So I just worry that, you guys see what I'm saying. So anyways, the other thing is Creighton Waters said they sent the search warrant to General Motors in March of 2022 for the OnStar data. Well, apparently they said they had no data, right? Well, last Friday, they get a call from GM. Somebody's watching the trial. And they found a lot of data with GPS from the Suburban for the night of the murders. And Harpootlian said this is a massive amount of data. And it shows many things we didn't have before. And they can't examine this until they can't cross-examine GM until their expert testifies. And so Creighton Waters says it just confirms the timeline that they've given to the jury. And so ultimately, Judge Nguyen said, it's an unexpected witness. The state disclosed it. And to be fair, they need adequate time to prepare, 2 to 3 days. And when this comes up, there'll be a decision made, I guess. So we'll see. I don't know. So yeah, it was interesting. So not only do we have this new OnStar stuff, we have COVID running rampant. Do the jury. Let's hope nobody else gets sick, and let's hope that those that have COVID on the jury feel better soon. It's no fun. I ran almost 105 fever and felt like I'd been beaten with a bat. So let's hop into day 16. Bear with me. I have my notes here. This DNA stuff, not gonna lie, y'all, a little bit hard to follow. I noticed that the jury was having a hard time following it. And when that's not unexpected. We have notebooks and we were all leaning in, asking each other, whose DNA was on that? What did you get? What did you get? It was just really hard to follow. The witness, super smart lady, very, very smart. I wish I were that smart, but you have to put this in layman terms because this jury is made up of people like you and me who are not DNA experts. And it was just when you get into these numbers that I've never even heard of, that it's, just put a chart up there and say, here's where we found Maggie's DNA. Here's where we found Paul's. Here's where we found Maggie and Alex. It would have been a lot simpler. And I'm not going to go through everything she did, but I do have a list of the DNA evidence. First, we had a SLED special agent, Ryan Kelly. He was just called for limited purposes. He collected buccal swabs from the Beach family, John Marvin, Ronald Freeman, Michael List, Matthew Lewis, Curtis Eddie Smith, all these people. So then we get into Rachel Nguyen, who is a SLED forensic scientist for DNA analysis and forensic serology. So she goes through and explains essentially how they test for DNA and the process. All right, so let's just break down a couple of things. Two things we didn't hear about with the DNA testing that I really thought we would. It was mentioned that Maggie had hair in her hand after she was killed. So if you see a picture of Bubba, he's a short furred, what do you call it? Short fur? He's got short fur. Not long fur, not like long locks. Seems like that hair had some length to it. I really thought maybe we would have heard something about that testing of that DNA for the hair found in her hand. The other thing that comes in later are the stomach contents. And correct me if I'm wrong, I cannot find, I think I have those notes back at my house. I go through one of these every week. So people comment on my note taking and I'm like, yeah, but I have a podcast. So normally if I'm home, I'm typing like crazy and y'all, my hand gonna be permanently like in pencil position or pen position by the time this is over. I've not written this much since high school. And the stomach contents, but I do think, I thought it was the prosecutors maybe, or was it the defense? Let me know if I'm wrong. Who said something about their stomach contents? So I was thinking over the weekend, maybe it's one of those things where they didn't have in their stomach what Blanca said she cooked, which was cube steak. And I think maybe some rice and gravy or something, a very Southern staple, cube steak. Yeah, my mom makes it. It's good. But it was the same stuff essentially. I thought maybe it would just bust Alex's explanation that they all had dinner together. Maybe it was something completely different than what Blanca made, but it was just telling how many cc's in their stomach. So DNA wise, what do we have? The blackout cartridge casing, Maggie's DNA, understandably. Shotgun shells had Paul. Feed room door was Paul. The steering wheel, Maggie and Alec. Now, with that, it would fit into his alibi that he went and touched the bodies and then called 911. And then if you remember, he was going up to the house to get the shotgun. So I think that's how the defense is going to explain that one away. Shotgun was Maggie and Alec. I try so hard not to say Alec, y'all, because I'm from the South and normally I would say Alec, but yeah. So, shotgun, both, which is interesting because we know that's not the shotgun that killed Paul. So one thing that when we were doing our lunchtime Q&A on Law and Crime, the expert said, well, if maybe somebody left that shotgun laying around and she picked it up to put it up and then Alec touched it later, we know that DNA has to be taken off these surfaces, right? So that could be one explanation for that. Could it be that maybe, I don't know. Y'all, this is all my brain. It's a wonder I don't have smoke coming out of my ears. I cannot get a grip on this case. I cannot figure out what's up. Okay, so this shirt, Maggie, Alex, and Paul, all three, they were found in various places. Sometimes it was Maggie, sometimes it was Alec and Maggie, sometimes it was the three of them. And the shorts, there was a mixture of all three as well. Left fingernail. This is what's interesting. So they take fingernail clippings at autopsies, as you know, on Maggie's left fingernail clippings. Maggie and an unknown male source, Paul and Alec excluded. Now, she had a manicure that day. So one point that the defense made is, hey, those are pretty clean once you get done. But on the other hand, too, I've got a manicure because y'all, if I put my fingernail polish on, y'all would think a 3-year-old did it. I'm just a tomboy that's wore more makeup in the last month, by the way, than I have since I've been an adult my whole life. I'm just saying. I'm very simple girl. But it's really, really hard to tell where's this unknown DNA, because I know this weekend when they were doing my manicure, they kind of used their fingernail to go under my fingernail to get like a little bit of fingernail polish that wasn't supposed to be on my skin. But here's what's interesting. CB Rowe, who is the Moselle groundskeeper, couldn't be excluded as a contributor, but it's like 11 times more likely the DNA came from somebody other than CB Rowe. There were very few little pieces of evidence to test, but at the same time, she's also in that area. So if she touched something that CB Rowe had touched, that could explain it. I mean, we don't know what she was doing there that night. She was running the dogs apparently, or visiting the dogs, but she could have grabbed anything that CB Rowe touched that had his DNA that transferred to under her fingernails. So I don't think that, I mean, for me, that's not like a big thing, but I think the defense will jump on that because that's an unknown male that could be the perpetrator and a defense. So the jacket, here's the big thing, the DNA on that rain jacket. There was DNA on there. They just couldn't get enough to get a sample. So I know Anjanette also said that Anjanette Levy from Law and Crime, who I'm so excited, if we don't get shut down, will be down here next week with me. Like she said too, she couldn't even find the brand of this jacket online. It might be old. You know, it could be one of those older things. Just not a whole lot, y'all. So the other thing, the hemotrace, this is what they use to find blood on a shirt. No human blood found on that shirt. Now, there could be some kind of an interaction between the LCV and I need to move my little buttons over this way. We're winging it here, y'all. Okay, so I'm trying to show. Well, it ain't working. Man, this thing don't work down here. There's something about this Wi-Fi, y'all. It makes my stuff go funky. Okay, so anyways, on the shirt, the LCV, remember the state tested it. It turned the shirt kind of a purple color. The defense wasn't able to do with it what they wanted to do. She said that the LCV, it can make it undetected, but there's some dispute to that in just a minute. So now let me pull up my regular notes. Thank you guys for being very patient. This is actually cross-exam. Was there any DNA analysis done on clothes? And she said only fingernails and buccal swabs. And so they point out under that left fingernail, there's an unidentified male contributor, and Paul and Alec were excluded as contributors. When asked, could you do further analysis on that? She said, because of so many males who are related, they decided to stop the analysis. There's no way to distinguish between the males. They talk about the nail salon. She could have gotten that unknown DNA sample anywhere at the salon, touching something CB touched, that kind of thing. Then she's asked, did you put any of this unknown DNA into the CODIS system, which, as we know, if somebody's been convicted of a felony or a violent offender, they have to give their DNA, and that goes into like a national database where you can see if there's a match. They did not put the sample in CODIS because the sample did not meet the threshold to put it in. And it was a partial low-level profile, so just not enough. The defense asked, is it unusual to not test clothing? And she said it depends. Typically, victims of gunshot wounds, there's so much blood and tissue on their clothing. And with touch DNA, you would need to know exactly where to look to isolate that specific area. And if they don't know exactly where to go, it's just, I guess it's tedious and all that stuff. But they talk about testing the hands. She said we did take the nail clippings. They point out that 300 blackout DNA that was Maggie's on that casing. That was found under her body, one of those. It could have been transfer DNA. But the shotgun shells, it's not unexpected that the shotgun shells or the 300 blackout around her body and Paul's body for the shotgun shells has their DNA. It went through their bodies. So that wasn't anybody, nobody said, wow, with that one. Unfortunately, just I'm telling you guys, the medical examiner rocked me to my core, y'all. Just a brutal, brutal double murder. I'll be thinking about it going to bed tonight. Those poor people. So the steering wheel with Maggie and Alex's DNA, it's not unexpected for his DNA to be on there. Also pointing out, he touched her dead body, so it could have been transferred that way. And she said, I just can't tell how it got there. And the 2 shotgun shells, Paul's DNA, was the shotgun. I'm sorry. Paul's DNA was not on the shotgun. And she said no. The other shotgun, there was a mixture. Paul was excluded, couldn't make a comparison. So that's interesting. And so they do the grid picture of the shirt. And I wish my thing was working. Let me see. It may not be plugged in. No, I probably don't. No, I do have it plugged in. So if I could get this working, that would be so much better. Let me see. Yeah, it ain't gonna work. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me see if I can do it this way. Wait, hang on. I can do it this way. Okay. Here's the shirt. So you can see at the bottom there where they've got some little markings on it. If you're new to the podcast, I'll put a link in the description with all the photos that I show on the episode, just so you don't miss anything we're talking about. You can see how they have it just squared off by letter across the bottom and then number up the side. And that's kind of how they were able to identify those stains and isolate them. And we will get to the medical examiner in just a minute. So back to the notes. Yeah, so it really was just one of those things where there wasn't any big moment in the DNA where you're like, okay, wow, all right, we've got a bloody fingerprint of his, or we've got something. It's all circumstantial again, and it's all kind of explainable because these people live together. I mean, we know Maggie didn't live at Moselle full time, but they're around each other. There's trace evidence on her shirt. She could have given her husband a hug. And that's one point that the defense made, by touching. So, but so going for this t-shirt, y'all. All right. So she made large cuttings, then she made smaller cuttings, right? And they do the hematest on those. Some of the cuttings were taken for DNA analysis. They do photos before and after the hematrace is done. And so he has her pretty much count out the areas of interest on the cuttings. Ultimately, 74 areas of interest on that shirt, and none of those were blood. And she says, no, they were all negative. But, the thing is, why are we sending it for blood spatter analysis if there's no blood? It's just interesting. I don't know. I think that this is going to be something the defense really, I think the shirt latches onto. We know they didn't want this evidence coming in. Tom Bevel, that they pretty much said that he changed his final findings from the first go round because of pressure to SLED. The shirt was hand delivered to him in Oklahoma, and that's the defense's theory, not my theory. But they were calling shenanigans on this report for a while. And so on August 17th of 2021, they had a meeting with SLED discussing items with pending DNA assignments. And there was a request for the hemotrace by our supervisor. And so that's how that came to be. So here's my question. No positives for blood, but they still sent it for the spatter analysis. And I guess you're covering your ground. But in 2021, so he asks that SLED was seeking blood spatter analysis. Were you told this? And she said, I knew after it was sent. And the first time hemotrace appeared on her report was in November 10th of 2021. The blue raincoat, also on the report, March 22nd, 2022. The report received said high velocity spatter on shirt. She said, I don't know when I was told, but I didn't get much info. I think I told you guys the blue raincoat, just not enough there to develop a profile. So April 11th, 2022, they have a meeting with the Attorney General. April 20th, or a request for a meeting. April 20th, that happened. So the request was April 11th. It happened on the 20th. And she asks if they had access to the April reports at that meeting, which was the report of the blood spatter from Dr. Bevel, Mr. Bevel. She said, I don't know. That had nothing to do with my report. So then they point out 6 days later, media reports of high velocity spatter. She's like, I don't know. We know Fitz News broke that. There was high velocity spatter on this shirt. So at some point they discussed he said at some point we discussed the hemotrace results. When was that? She said, I don't know. I wasn't present for all meetings. Now, there was a memorandum to file for the case authored by the witness, and it was about hemotrace and the effects of prior testing before hemotrace. We had that LCV test, remember, that turned it purple? That was done before the hemotrace. Who asked for so she did all this research. She pulled up these journals, these medical journals, or I guess like forensic journals, and she was asked, who asked you for that research? And she said, Creighton Waters, because there was negative results for the hemotrace. And he wanted more information on hemotrace results. So then the defense asked, did you talk about a report by Tom Bevel? No. Were you aware of a report by Tom Bevel about the use of hemotrace? And she said no. I'm curious. He'll be coming in, I'm assuming, in the next couple of days, maybe. It's going to be hard though, because you're confusing the jury. You're saying there's no blood on this shirt. Now, higher primates, it could, but there's no blood on the shirt. So they sent it to Tom Bevel, and she attached articles to her report to Creighton Waters after treatment with LCV to test for hemotrace. It can show a positive, by the way, after LCV use, and it worked most of the time, but they got 2 negative. And so if you're confused, it's because I was confused. So I thought the defense was good with this. They actually explained the DNA quickly and efficiently and in a way that wasn't confusing. And so the defense points out this is a fishing shirt, and they show the fishing logo on the shirt. So with it being a fishing shirt, it might not be human blood, but it's present on the shirt. And so they go through the article she included in her report. Hemotrace detects blood at a level with the LCV light that it can't trace. So were you aware this was a fishing t-shirt? And she said no. It's not human blood. So January 5th, 2023, the meeting took place. So this is just last month to talk about results from the shirt. She said, I don't remember the exact items discussed. It's a month ago, by the way. Just saying. A lot of work on this t-shirt, cuttings in the beginning, cutting down from the larger cuttings into smaller ones, and using hemotrace, your memo, the meetings from June 21st, 2021 to a month before trial. All this work. And the theory is he was wearing the shirt on the night of the murders. And then the defense says any discussion of the blue shirt at the meetings. And she said, not that I remember. The blue shirt being the one from the Snapchat video that showed us that at least an hour before the murders, Alec was in very different clothing. What you know, alibis, I've been traveling weekly to cover the Alec Murdaugh murder trial. And I hate packing. And even more, I hate loading and unloading a bunch of bags when I get back to Walterboro. The Weekender bag from Base has cut down the number of bags I need to take and has all the things I need, like a laptop sleeve and even a key leash. Base was created by actress Shay Mitchell to make sleek and affordable bags, luggage, and accessories designed to help you travel effortlessly while still looking fashionable. Base has thought of everything you could ever want in a piece of luggage. 360-degree gliding wheels, a cushioned handle, built-in weight indicator, washable bags for your dirty clothes, and all the interior pockets you need to keep organized. Their luggage comes in multiple sizes and colors, and for shorter trips, the Weekender bag is super functional and even has a place to store your shoes separately. Every piece is made to look better with miles, so you don't have to worry about it in cargo or overhead. And Base has over 30,000 five-star reviews. Whether you're packing for a quick trip or looking to breeze through the security line, Base has your personal items covered. Right now, Base is offering my listeners 15% off your first purchase by visiting basetravel.com/whattheworld. Go to basetravel.com/whattheworld for 15% off your first purchase. That's Base, BEIS travel.com/whattheworld. And now it's time for a word for our sponsor of the week, Lomi by Pila. Look, I've never been able to compost before. It's always too complicated, too much work, and it's too stinky. Then I got a Lomi. Lomi allows me to turn my food scraps into dirt with the push of a button. It's a countertop electric composter that turns scraps into dirt in under 4 hours. There's no smell when it runs, and it's really quiet. Thanks to Lomi, I have way less garbage each week, down from 4 bags to 2, by the way, and I feel great knowing I'm composting and creating soil instead of waste. I've basically a limitless supply of dirt for my garden. So what can you put in Lomi? Food leftovers, fruits and vegetables, eggs and eggshells, grains, coffee grounds, yard trimmings, houseplants, and more. If you want to start making a positive environmental impact or just make cleanup after dinner that much easier, Lomi is perfect for you. Head to lomi.com/whattheworld and use the promo code WHATTHEWORLD to get your $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/whattheworld and use promo code WHATTHEWORLD at checkout. Food waste is gross. Let Lomi save you a cold trip out to the garbage can. And I think that, yeah. So then it says, can you have blood spatter without blood? And then there's an objection that's sustained. So on redirect, are you aware before you analyze there were presumptive positives? And that's the thing. You can get a presumptive positive like in the field, but when you test it in a lab with, like chemicals like hemotrace, it can be negative. And in this case, it was. And it says you analyze cases and shot shells from the scene. What for? And she said touch DNA. And so they go through all these different exhibits and their numbers of what she tested for touch trace DNA. And then she's asked, do you determine what to analyze? And she said, no, there is a request of what I need to analyze. And then she said, who asked to analyze Paul and Maggie's clothings? And she said, nobody. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, this is a brutal double murder. Why would you not at least try to see if there's trace DNA on there? You never know. Reminds me of that Coldplay song. If you never try, you never know. So anyways, they also bring up the point that, is it possible to find touch DNA on your husband's shirt? Yeah. As an objection. Okay. So pathologist, I'm just going to tell you guys, this was brutal. This was hard for the jury, specifically a couple of jurors in particular. One stood out to me the most, but she did an amazing job of really breaking this down and making it easy to understand. This was incredibly painful for the family. I saw John Marvin's wife and Brooklyn, Buster's girlfriend, crying. Buster's face was red, head down. John Marvin, red-faced. Sister, they all just, nobody wants to sit here and listen to how two people you love were brutally murdered. I felt terrible for them today. So she starts off doing an external exam first, head to toe, before cutting anything. They take photographs of how they come, the minute they open the body bags, all that stuff. And then ultimately you get down to the wounds. But they did the autopsies on both Paul and Maggie on June 10th of 2021. That's 3 days later. And she talks about having assistants in there to help her, but she is the doctor. And they take photos, any physical evidence they find, they seal and transfer to law enforcement for the investigation. So Paul's autopsy. And they bring out a board that shows kind of just the general male figure. And she goes from there. We did not get to see any of these photos. They're under seal. The monitors were covered. So I'm going to do my best to walk you through here. Essentially, she writes her notes on this very standard diagram. You've seen it. It's the front and the back of the person. And what she'll do is take those notes and incorporate them into her final autopsy report. So Paul had 2 shotgun wounds, pellets enclosed in the webbing. After the bullet is fired, it opens. It kind of feathers out with these plastic things, and then it allows the pellets to go loose. His injuries indicated shotgun wounds. Just, it's not hard to tell for people that do this every day. By the way, this woman's done over 5,000 autopsies. So speaking of his injuries, left side of the chest, there was wadding that traveled beneath the skin and soft tissue through the muscle and fat by exiting the left armpit area. So it was a right to left shot, right to left. It did not enter into his chest cavity. The wadding got stuck and it didn't completely exit. So on the left side of the chest, it was there just under the skin. And he had shotgun pellets under the left side of his underarm and a bunch of exit pellet wounds on the left side of the arm and some on his back. So there was stippling on this wound. So for her, gunpowder ignites, right? It projects the bullet out. The projectile can travel long distances. Gunpowder can travel about 3 feet max. So when somebody has stippling, we know that they were within 2 to 3 feet of that person when they were shot, if they're stippling. And there was stippling on this. There are abrasions from gunpowder. This shot was at close range, no more than 3 feet. This shot was not fatal. If that was all, it would need some stitches, a little irrigation, but it did not pierce the chest. There was a left lung contusion, which is a bruise essentially from the energy of the bullet. But he would have been able to stand up with this injury. So now they show photos during autopsy. We had one poor juror, y'all. She was very deeply disturbed looking at these photos, and she was a little fidgety in her chair, kind of kept having her hand on her head, and then at one point reaches forward and asks a juror in front of her for a tissue, and you think she's going to wipe her eyes, but she's kind of wiping her head. Judge Nguyen, very observant of this jury, and came in just the nick of time, I think, and called for a break. You take people like you and I who are not CSI, we're not forensics. I worked in a morgue, so I'm kind of used to seeing dead bodies, but these jurors are not crime scene agents, and probably because they don't want to look at that stuff. And this is just with the description of these wounds, very graphic, very graphic. You're talking about seeing a very young man with nothing but his face essentially above his shoulders. Everything else was kind of gone according to what, I'm seeing. So we took the break, at one point. This was the close-ups of the head. So they took the wadding out during autopsy. Some of the wadding, it was a different angle with the arm up. So she took a picture just of the arm up and showing some abrasions on the underside of Paul's chest. Now, she thinks his arm was down by his side at the time of the shooting. In other words, not up in a defensive position. Did not seem he had any defensive wounds. So either he didn't see them at all, which is hard to believe with stippling, or he was comfortable with who he was around. And the abrasions are caused by pushing skin before exiting. And they also said that his exit wound was shored, which means it's not like circular. It's kind of jagged. The exit pellet wounds on the outside of the arm, they find their way through the skin and they spread out the further they travel. So the gosh awful shotgun injury to the head. This oh, man. Um so he had a very large shotgun defect on the top of his left shoulder. Lots of pellets were recovered from that across the top of the left shoulder. So this is how this traveled, this fatal bullet. Top of the left shoulder. Then it goes into, well, the left neck, and then it goes kind of side of the head exit and blows out kind of the backside of his skull. She said it was a slight front to back trajectory, and on the side, without the side of the neck and face, it went through the base of the skull. The brain was ejected out of the top of his head. We know it's been said his brain was lying by his ankles. And the brain actually came in a separate bucket to autopsy. Jeez Louise, y'all. He had abrasions and a scrape on the right side of his face, and she attributed that to after the fatal headshot just hitting the ground, the body just falls. Obviously, there can be a little movement with that, and Paul had his head tilted to one side at the time of the headshot because his face remained intact. And the injury was at the top of the shoulder. There were pellets recovered in the shoulders and inside the skull. So this is the point where we see the photos, and this is where it gets real for these jurors, bless their hearts. One was rubbing his face at one point, he just kept it there. I looked, and there was one juror who was looking out at us to avoid looking at it. Yeah. I mean, you can just imagine. So for the photos, she points out the scrapes on the right side of his face that hit the ground. And, he just had some motion as his face hit the ground that caused that little scrape. And she said, this is a typical wound for this type of injury to get that scraping on the face. So the top of the left shoulder picture, there's a continuation of that projectile through the face to the skull that exited through the right side of the top of the head towards the back. So if I could get my little exhibits up here, I could show you. This really, for me, it's been so hard to listen to. It's just such a brutal murder, y'all. This poor mom and son. Another photo shows pellets inside the skull. Some went through the neck, even the earlobe, the base of the skull, and ultimately ejected the brain. There was a piece of his head, like forehead, still intact, but the contents of the skull were disrupted at top. The face, right side area, and the top of head, you can see inside the skull. So the right side area and the top of the head, there's just nothing there. It's been blown out. So this is when we, after they showed this picture that showed inside the skull that had been blown from the shotgun blast, that's when we took our break, and she really needed it, man. I wanted to hug her, but then that'd be a whole thing. So I better not. No defensive wounds, on Paul, no hands, no injuries to his hands, to his face, or nothing like that. The only thing in his system toxicology-wise was caffeine. The shot to the chest, Paul could have remained standing, and the top left shoulder to the head, immediately fatal. She said it defies logic that the headshot came first because he would have just been down immediately. So she believes the chest shot, he stayed standing, and then that's when the top of the left shoulder through the neck, face, and the head was the fatal wound, immediately fatal. So Maggie's autopsy, 5 gunshot wounds, could be 4 shots with 5 wounds, but she put 5 wounds. They bring the diagram back out. The injuries are different because it's a different weapon. This is an assault rifle. There's, shotgun 1, entrance below the rib cage, that was front to back and downward. So 10 inches below the entrance is an exit wound. The bullet went through the abdominal bed. the mesentery support, which is like it supports your intestines. It's tissue that keeps your tissue in place. And towards the back, it went through the pancreas, the left kidney, the left iliac artery, exited on the left side, and there was stippling. Very close proximity. Also, the pathologist did not hide the fact that this shotgun or this assault rifle shot would not have been immediately fatal. Very painful. And poor Maggie was in some misery ultimately before she was shot in the head twice. But that one was not immediately fatal. So, number 2, the front inside of the left thigh, front to back. There was a slight right towards left downward parallel pattern of these shots. It exited on the left back thigh. There was stippling within 3 feet. 2 to 3 feet is kind of what they say. So this is up close and personal. And at one point, I don't know who says it. I think maybe the state, but it's almost like whoever was shooting Maggie was circling her. Oh, okay. So the left wrist entrance, it exited higher on the inside of the wrist, but it entered on the hard part and exited on the soft part of your wrist. And it's possible that it was a continuation shot, meaning it just passed through, but it was part of another shot. Wound number 4, she called it an unusual upward direction. That was the front underside of the left breast. Exit was at the top of the left breast, and they saw marks and bruising. It went under her left clavicle, which is your collarbone. The bullet went into the underside of the left side of the face, and then the exit and re-entrance through the head. So there was an abrasion below the left breast before so before the bullet went into the skin, it scraped the skin as it's going up. Number 5, entrance wound, back of the head at the base of the skull. It's a downward trajectory, and with rifles, a lot of times you find projectile fragments when you're doing the autopsy. Lots of exit wounds on the upper side of the back, entered the back of the head through the brain stem, fractured the skull. That was immediately fatal. So with the left breast wound and the left face, you've got an injured brain, somebody not standing at this point. She could be hunched over from kidney pain. She said that is just, if she compared it to a kidney stone, but like a million times worse. Could be bent over, but that could explain the upward trajectory. She did not feel she was lying flat when the one that came through her face went. She could have been on her hands and knees with her head bent or just bent over. Ultimately, she fell to the ground. The gunshot wound was not too far away, or the shooter was not too far away when she was shot. So we get to the photos of her autopsy. Left thigh, the inside area, you see that stippling. And the back of the left thigh was the exit wound. That was photo number 2. Photo number 3 entered the right abdominal space close to the midline. The stippling on that was a little bit further back, so maybe not the 2 to 3 feet range, but it still was there, so maybe 4 feet. I don't know. They didn't really give a alternate number. And then that exits to the back. Number 5, left wrist wound going through. It just exits straight through. It was just a in and out shot. That was not fatal. So they talk about the belly button on the right. She's explaining the picture on the right entrance. You can see abrasions where that bullet kind of gave the abrasions on her belly. The left side of the face, she shows the left ear was affected, and did not go into the left shoulder. There were bruises on her collarbone area into left side of face. Photo number 8, this was the wound to the left breast, the left side of the abdomen. The hand was on the abdomen. And so that was one explanation, is if she's kind of holding her abdomen, and then she could be shot through the wrist. And the back of the head, there was hair there, but she said she had to shave it to display that wound. She said Ammo breaks into fragments. It went down her back, through her skin. The bullet side of the skull brainstem just goes right through that. So, gunshot wound to the abdomen. Was Maggie and or the shooter changing position? It could be moving closer to her, or she could be moving away. Can't determine that. The back of the headshot, the shooter is circling the victim. Shot fired behind her. It says chin area to back of head. So that's an execution right there. Can you imagine circling somebody? I mean, you've shot them several times and you're just circling. Or, I mean, are you enjoying the pain they're in? It seems so personal. It just seems so personal. I just can't imagine, y'all. The last shot going downward, the wound to the left side of, let's see, the last shot going downward. Someone standing over her. That's another back of the head shot. Not a lot of blood in the abdomen. So that tells her there was a ton of soft tissue destruction and no defensive wounds. They also look for on women, or men, if you like your nails long, for like broken fingernails in a struggle. Oftentimes you'll see that in women if they have nails and there's a physical struggle. She feels the shots were quick. Now we get to the stomach contents. There was a lot of food. They both have full bellies. Same food. It was a tan liquid, about 600 milliliters. So 450 milliliters is a pound. Maggie had 600, a little over a pound, and Paul was right at a pound. But it was the same food. Toxicology for Miss Maggie, only caffeine. The cause of death, Paul Murdaugh, shotgun wound to the head and chest, manner of death. Homicide, death at the hand of another. That's her words. Maggie died of multiple gunshot wounds, manner homicide, death at the hands of another. And they also showed the multiple recovered fragments that they got from Maggie's autopsy. So that was kind of it. I'm sorry if this seems a little disorganized and confusing. It kind of was that day for us. The pathologist was great. The DNA lady was super smart, but it was just hard. The thing is this, we just didn't have any big aha moment again. And they're finishing tomorrow and Wednesday is it. They confirmed it at the end of court today. Mr. Harpootlian wanted to verify that Wednesday is that last day for them. Yes, it is. So they'll take over. We'll see Wednesday when the jury gets tested. Are we going to have jurors that don't have COVID and keep going? It goes both ways. You don't want to stop the trial for 10 days. You don't want witnesses to forget anything or be tempted to look elsewhere for information. But at the same time, if you lose, if you don't have 12, you can't deliberate. And then we do this all over again. And nobody wants to do that. The family doesn't want to do that. State doesn't want to do that. So that was just kind of it. I just feel like right now we've got to get this all tied in together. I think the jurors are feeling it too. There are times they're engaged, but there's also times where they're not, they're trying, but they just can't grasp it. I think the DNA evidence today was maybe the most confused I've seen them. And I would say some of the financial stuff too, that's been the two main areas where now when she would give results of whose DNA was found, they would perk up and listen. But doing all the kind of 2-minute explanation before you get right to whose DNA was where, it was a little bit lost. And then again, like I said before, the reaction of the jury with those autopsy photos, everybody had their own reaction. A couple of people were very stoic. Several diverted their eyes, faces got red, just kind of hand to face. I noticed a lot of that. And that's just kind of like pondering. And I really want to take like a professional body language class. By the way, they have that I don't even know whose channel it is. They have that body cam thing where so it's the body cam in the car and a panel of 4 guys who are super smart dudes. They analyze Alex body language for right there when he is in the car right after the murders and the first responders pull up. So I'm back on STS podcast tomorrow. It will be released early in the morning with an attorney from Columbia. Josh, I cannot, what's his name? Hang on. I'll tell you. I'm sorry, Taylor Bell. He was great to talk to. He looks really familiar to me. Of course, everybody in South Carolina looks familiar to me. I feel like I know people everywhere. So that was kind of it today. Just very devastating testimony for the family and, for the jurors and everything. And it just, man, they were brutally murdered and nobody deserves that, right? So curious to see these next 2 days. I think that the medical examiner testimony was very powerful, and I think it definitely went in the state's favor. Cross exam, that will be first thing in the morning. They did not get to cross exam today. It was almost 6 when we got finished with direct with the pathologist. So anyways, all right, guys, I will upload the photos that would not come on here. I'll put them in a link in the description wherever you're watching or listening. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe, like the videos because it pushes those out to other people who might like it. It helps me grow. So I appreciate it. If you hit that little bell, it'll notify you every time I post something new. I keep saying I'm going to do more shorts. I'm going to do more shorts starting tomorrow. So that way you can kind of get a little look around the courthouse in the morning, and then you can catch me on Law and Crime at the morning break, the hour lunch break, the afternoon break, and then tomorrow you can catch the episode of the STS podcast, and then I'll be here doing all this again. So let's see what we got on tap for tomorrow. Hopefully no more COVID, y'all. I don't want this thing to shut down. Let's do it. Let's get through it. Wear your masks. And everybody feel better that has COVID because those people sat for weeks and now they're out because they have COVID. So, anyways, I hope those that are sick feel better soon. And I hope we all stay healthy because I do not need it. I had it in December. I've paid my dues. I've been vaccinated and I don't want to do it again. So, all right, guys, your girl's going to bed. Been a long day, an emotional day, very emotional day. It was hard to see the emotion on the family's faces. Everybody has their own opinions about the Murdaugh family, but I see them as humans who have not been named by law enforcement as anybody associated with this. So to me, they're victims and can't imagine sitting there as Buster listening about my brother's brain being brought to autopsy in a bucket and how his mom was essentially stalked and murdered. It's just more than most people can bear. So anyways, all right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. I hope you have a good one. I'm out.